west to California and to places like Oregon, and eventually to Utah. That's another story that's very interesting, and it doesn't really. I don't really have the time today to delve too much into that, but all of these things, as I say, I studied very diligently in the British Museum, and along with my own records, and I have something like 37,000 copies of these Annals of Congress. I think it's an achievement that very few Americans have been able to get to, because it takes a long, long time, and it's not the kind of thing that you read easily. It's not like a book that flows. This is, you have to, I have that special color code, and if you look at my copies, they're full of red, blue, yellow, and purple underlinings, but everything stands for something, and that's how I was able to keep track and find out about this tremendously powerful company called the British East India Company.
Yes.
And they even got a charter from the King of England to wage war on their own account. They had armies, they had foreign mission diplomats. They were a government within a government, and very, very powerful people. And they dictated the policies. And they went to war against China 3 times, because China didn't want its people turned into a nation of opium addicts.
Yeah.
And this was a huge market for them. So it gets very deep and very profound when you really get down to it, which is what I did. And that is how I came to write the book, The Committee of 300, because that discloses all of this information. And once you begin, I had a lawyer phone me up one day, and he said, I got your book, and I started reading it on Friday night. He said, I finished it on Saturday night. He said, and I started from the beginning, and I read right through it again the weekend. And he said, I even wanted to read through it again on Monday, but I had to go to my normal duties of work, so I couldn't do that. Mm. It's a profound book. I don't say this to put laurels around my neck, far be that from what I want, but it is a book of knowledge that deserves to be in the hands of every American family and even Canadian people, because there's a lot about Canada and how they inveigled Canada to come into the scheme. And now the leading Canadian families were also involved in this.
Wouldn't you say, though, John, that this also concerns, obviously, all the citizens of the entire planet here, because the strive of many of the groups that we can find traces of out there is, of course, in many cases, world domination, it seems like. So
that's right.
Everybody, right?
That was the eventual goal. The eventual goal was a new world order inside a one world government, where everybody would be just equal down to nothing. And the big thing was the destruction to get rid of the American middle class, which was a unique class of people never been seen in any society in the world before. And to that extent, they've largely succeeded. If you look around today, the middle class as a people in America has virtually disappeared.
Yeah.
The jobs were exported to other countries. And there is today no middle class.
That's right. It's on its way out. John, if we quickly go back to the documents that you mentioned again, because I find that interesting as well, the documents that you studied in the British Museum in London. Do you know if the documents are still there? And if so, what kind of status, as you mentioned, do you need to have to go into the museum and actually see these documents?
You need to have had military service in the British Armed Forces to a higher degree. In other words, you must have been a colonel or a higher rank, and then you get access to it. If you haven't, then you've got no chance of getting in there at all. It's a very secret part of the British Museum, and very few people even know it exists.
Right. Yeah. And I reckon this would be a vast library of documentation that you can go through, and it must be some kind of. Is there people keeping track on these and indexing the contents of what is there in terms of all the documents?
Well, you'd need a mentor. They do have mentors in the museum.
Yeah.
And they can, if they take a special liking to you, they can make it very, very easy for you. If they don't like you, they can make it very difficult for you. I was fortunate that one of them seemed to adopt me, and he was of greatest assistance to me, and enabled me to make all my notes and prepare for my book. Without his help, I would not have been able to complete the task.
Interesting. And
as
then,
I said, it's a book that was begun many, many years ago, and it's taken the better part of my adult life to finish and present.
Did you find any of the historical references here in terms of this group of 300? As I did a bit of research here as well, obviously the thing that I came up with is it seems to be that a reference made by Walter Rathenauer is one of the earliest ones, the statesman who served as a foreign minister of the of that time Germany, the Weimar Republic. Is that right? Something you can confirm, John? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Walter Rathenau went right out on the limb and exposed to people, and of course for that he was murdered. He was shot and murdered outside his house one day. It's a very tragic story. It's contained in the book. The full story is contained in there. Also very interesting for a lot of people who made a big issue out of it is the history of the Beatles. Now you might wonder what that's doing in a book like The Conspiracy, but it's all part of the conspiracy, because the prime task of the Beatles was to sing, to organize music, and to play at these concerts that attracted millions of the youth, and then give out little packets of drugs, heroin and LSD and all that kind, not LSD, but heroin and opium for them to try out. And many of them, of course, became drug addicts by attending these massive concerts. And there again, you find that the music was not, the music for the Beatles, when they were discovered, they were playing in a cellar in Hamburg's red light district.
That's right.
A small little downstairs cellar, and if you've ever been to Hamburg, there are literally hundreds of them, and they have little small bands playing there, and they have food going and everything. And the Beatles played in one of those. They weren't called the Beatles at all. And the reason they're called the Beatles is that the name was given to them by one of the dignitaries in England, because the scarab beetle of Egypt was supposed to be a sign of knowledge and immense knowledge. Mm. That's why they called them the Beatles. They were supposed to be spreading immense knowledge through their music. And, we had the story that they wrote most of their music. That's not true at all. In the latter part, they might have written a few pieces, but the majority of their music was written for them by a man who was specially commissioned, and even he was given a place at the Queen's Northern residence and all facilities to help these people, the Beatles, write the lyrics and the music to their music.
And this is something that you detail, or I think as well, that you go into in the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, that particular book as
that's
well, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's also my book, and it tells how we as a nation have been totally controlled in every aspect of our policies, even going to war, by the Tavistock Institute, which is the largest brainwashing, you may use a colloquial term, the largest brainwashing institution in the world. And that book, of course, is also available to your listeners. And if they want to see what we've got to offer, they can go to the website, sales@coleman300.com.
Excellent. We'll definitely give out the website again later on as we wrap things up for the first hour here, John. But if we go back a little bit to the 300 again, and we briefly mentioned Walter Rathenau, that's one source, and obviously then there seems to be other references throughout history as well, and I want to know if you have made these connections as well. A couple of years ago now, there was actually a movie. I think that this is a remake as well, actually. It was called 300, and it was actually about a small Spartan army that was, fighting basically the Persians with the Xerxes. This was a reference to the Battle of, I think it's called Thermopylae. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but this Spartan group anyway, who call themselves the 300. Do you think that any of this goes back to that particular group?
No,
or stretching it?
That's nothing. That absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Nothing whatsoever.
All right. And other references I found as well was in terms of during the French Revolution. I don't know if this was Cagliostro who referenced this as well, but there was somebody who allegedly shouted out during, I don't know what particular time this is during the revolution, but like someone who's representing the forces of the revolution, that we are 300 men, someone shouted out. Have you heard about that before, John?
Yes, that's a fact. That did happen. That did in fact happen. They were defending the barricades and manning the barricades, and that's what they said. We are 300, but we are also powerful in other directions. So it was not directly connected with this historical matter that I'm talking about, but all of these had some significance in the number 300. And that's something which I was never actually able to get right to the bottom of, except that there were 300 families that controlled the United States and England and the UK and all of Europe, in fact. They were the kings and the princes and the higher officials of these nations. Not in the United States, we didn't have kings and princes. We just finished that a long time ago. But as I said, they included their U.S. relations, like the Andesite-Perkins family, for instance, which controlled all of the trade out of Boston. Very, very aristocratic families, to use a term that might explain it better than any other term.
The Committee of 300 are also best referred to as the Olympians, another kind of Greek Roman reference, if you will, as well there. But would you equate this group, the 300, with the Illuminati, this group that many people now are getting savvy to and so forth?
They did say we are the 300, yes, and they are the 300. And as I said, they're made up of the rulers of the world. The Illuminati is only a cog in this immense machine. It's one of the cogs in this huge machine. And it's just a part of the whole apparatus. And it has a special purpose, of course. And we know that it's been going for a long, long time. It began in Bavaria with a conspiracy against the kings and the princes of the nation. That was uncovered. And they tried to stamp these people out by executing them, but that didn't work. They, in fact, proliferated in other countries. Now, that's part and parcel of the Committee of 300 as the main controlling body. This is one of its arms. It's one of its facets, if you wish.
Absolutely, because you mentioned so many different groups that potentially also then tie into this particular network. Obviously, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, also sometimes known as Chatham House, potentially is involved in this. CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, the Round Table Group, maybe even the Bilderberg Group. Do you think that all of these are essential, components, then, if you will, of the 300 group, John?
Well, my book deals with these, each one individually, and certainly they're all part of the whole. And they make a very compelling group, and they call themselves the Olympians because they believe that they were specially chosen by God, that they were above all other men and all other creatures on the earth, and that they were specially selected by God, and they had godlike powers. And like the old Greeks and the Olympians, they believed the same thing. So this is where that name came from, the Olympians. And this was sort of a subtitle of the Committee of 300. It was used mainly amongst themselves and by the people who talked about it when they did talk about it in very hushed tones, because it didn't do to say too much in open public about these people. They didn't take kindly to that.
How does an agenda like this, do you think, persevere throughout history? This is one of the enigmatic questions that many people, and rightfully so, have asked about various groups that are out there. And obviously this is something in terms of philosophical thought that can be applied to any of these groups. But if we're not dealing with individuals who are in some way utilizing a technology or some kind of medicine that the rest of us doesn't know, or they're, not from around here, which means that they, live much longer, 500 years, 200 years potentially. If we're not talking about that, then obviously we are talking about people who live and then die, and new people come into this particular group. But how do you think the philosophy keeps on going throughout so many hundreds of years, John?
Well, it's handed down from father to son, and especially in the royal families in Europe. So that's what keeps them going, and it's not anything to do with the legend of the people, the giants who walked the earth here.